Oh, we thought we knew nearly everything about the Final Fantasy series, but I recently dug something up that I wanted to share with you all. In 2002, we were graced with the release of a little game called Kingdom Hearts. It was the combined effort of two juggernauts, Square and Disney. At the time, we were totally enthralled in the idea that these two companies put their heads together to create something. But what next to none of us knew was that 20 years prior, Disney and Square got together to make a Final Fantasy comic book that would be published under Disney's comic book imprint known as Hollywood Comics. To really kick this off, I just want to make note right here that there are only a few pictures and screenshots of the comics themselves. I only found a total of 3, and I'll show you those in a moment. Right now, I want to tell you about the 3 individuals who are juggernauts in their own right in the comic book world. Kurt Busiek, Del Barris, and Mike Mignola. Kurt Busiek has written for many comics over the years, such as a variety of Avengers comics, as well as Aquaman, a new Conan series, and his own Astro City. Del Barris' illustrations and credits are listed on the Marvel website and is currently a part of DreamWorks Animations. His style seems to be the quintessential comic book art style that dominated at the time, and it's a style all his own. And lastly, Mike Mignola created Hellboy. I mean, there's a ton of other things he's also done, but that credit alone is pretty solid to me. These are the 3 people that were tasked in 1990 to make the 4-issue comic series about the game that was starting to get a foothold in America. See, at the time, the only game that was out in America was the first Final Fantasy game. In Japan, Final Fantasy IV was about to be released, and soon would follow suit in the States too as Final Fantasy II. Busiek was nearly hired to do localizations for Square's games at the time to make them more Americanized, but he turned it down. He then asked if he could get some of the source material for Final Fantasy IV to make the 4-issue comic series sort of a tie-in to the game, and Square agreed. The 3 began work on the series that was slated for a 1992 release, and the work was coming along just fine. All 4 covers drawn by Mignola were completely finished, and Busiek called them gorgeous. Busiek wrote over half the series, and Barris finished the art for the first issue and was working on the second when work was completely halted on the project. Hollywood Comics was having financial struggles and canceled the project, completely shutting down all operation in 1993. The Final Fantasy comic series was totally forgotten about until October of 2020. Busiek took to Twitter to talk about the creation of the comic and shared some inside stories and some photos of some of the finished work. When asked if he would release all of it so that fans of the game series could see it for what it was, he declined, stating the series had become almost too big of a cultural phenomenon and that the liberties taken with the series would probably do nothing but enrage the fans. And maybe he was right. When pressed a little harder about the liberties, he claimed that Cecil and Kane were terrible names for lead characters, and that there was an engineer type character, who I'm guessing would be Sid, that he renamed to Lord Blast. So maybe it was a good thing that we didn't get this comic after all. So looking at these photos of it, it does look fantastic, and despite the weird name changes and all that, I would still really love to see what would have been. And hopefully I'm not alone. Busiek stated that he still has copies of the little work that was finished, so there's at least a small bit of hope that maybe this will see the light of day, even in its unfinished state. You know, I wish that there was a little more to report about the story, but the story literally ends right here. Not a whole lot of information can be found at all, and after digging for quite some time, the 3 photos I showed earlier are it. There's no more. But maybe Busiek is right. Maybe the comic is just a product of its time and simply wouldn't work in today's environment, kinda like Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. And what does Final Fantasy Mystic Quest have to do with Bob Barker? Well, I at least mention him. But if you enjoyed this game years ago, you definitely don't want to miss this video about Mystic Quest and if it would work as a pixel remake or a full-blown 3D remake.